Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Toni Bell, and I would like to welcome you to this next session on Getting Real 2022 on impact producing. I'm going to start with it's good to be back. And thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we have a very captive audience here. So just to go over some housekeeping things, if you would like to post questions, please do that in the chat. We'll be monitoring that. There's also an ASL interpreter available. You should be able to see that channel. And then there's live captioning, correct? Yeah, there's live captioning available. So if you need instructions on how to do that, just let us know. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and get started. I am going to start off by introducing myself, and I'll be giving a visual description as well as my pronouns and telling you a little bit about my current impact work. So if our guests could follow our lead as I go through that, that would be great. So I'm Toni Bell. I'm a Black woman with shoulder length sister locks. I'm wearing a black top, and I am sitting to the right of my fellow panelist. My pronouns are she and her, and I'm currently the impact producer for Abigail Disney's latest film, The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales. Sorry, it's a late night last night. I also do impact producing for Odyssey Impact Partners, which does this outreach to faith-based and secular organizations for small documentary social justice films. And I'm also doing impact for a document called Personal Documentaries, The Power of Personal Documentary Storytelling for Represent Media. And I have a podcast, What's Up with Docs. Oh, and I teach at Saybrook University, impact producing. So that's it. Next, Cecilia, please go.
I'm next by default.
Yes.
I'm Cecilia Mejia. I am an Asian American with curly hair. I'm sitting in the middle of this live panel, I guess, if you see us live. I am currently the impact director for Asian American Documentary Network, so I'm leading that effort. I recently just finished some impact work for this new film called Delicado, which just premiered on POV. I just did the lesson plan for that and also creating some of the impact work for that. And also another film, which is very similar, both combat environmental justice in the Philippines in particular, but also working on a couple of other impact projects that are mostly tied to education. So that's really my sweet spot. And I also teach at NYU. Impact producing actually just came off of teaching my class virtually. They were like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm in LA." But yeah, so I teach that, and I also do a couple of master classes with the Gotham.
Sam.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Sam Adler, she, her. I am a white woman with medium brown hair wearing a black dress, and I'm all the way to the left. I'm the senior program manager at Exposure Labs on our impact team. So in the past have worked on our impact campaigns for our original films, including Chasing Coral and The Social Dilemma. And now I'm focused on moving that work into longer term programmatic work with a focus on climate and tech reform, soon open to other issue areas, and excited to say, we just launched a short form film program, which is a response to the movements in which we're working. So excited to talk about all those things.
Thank you. Now we're going to go to our participants who are Zooming in from many other places. So Andrew, let's start with you.
Hi. If everybody can hear me, I'm Andrew Catauro, a white 30-something-year-old man sitting with a dark shaggy hair, dark shirt with some kind of white pattern in front of a very sparse attic wall that was very poorly lit. I've lost a lot of the daylight that I assumed I was going to have. I guess it's that time of year. I am joining from New York on unceded Lenape lands. My pronouns are he, him. And my impact work most recently, I guess, I mean, it goes back from most recently funder work here at Perspective Fund. I'm a program officer overseeing our grants directly to film projects for production and impact campaign work. And prior to that was at the Ford Foundation in the Just Films program with Kara Murtis, Chi Wei Young, Sharon LaCruz. prior to that at POV as a producer, working both on broadcast and some of the impact materials.
Thank you. Alysa?
Hi, everyone. Alysa Nahmias. Pronouns are she, her. I'm a white woman with short brown hair and glasses. I'm wearing a black and yellow kind of floral blouse and gold hoop earrings. And I'm in a hotel room that's hard to describe, but it's not remarkable, in New York right now, even though I'm based in LA. And so unceded Lenape land, if I'm not mistaken. Andrew helped me out with that one. Let's see, my company is called Agna Films. I'm a filmmaker and director and producer. And some of the ways that I'm involved with impact are through my projects. Most recently, right now I have Wildcat, which I produced. It's with Amazon Studios, directed by Melissa Lesh and Trevor Frost, that just premiered at Telluride. And hopefully more people, I know more people will have a chance to see it very soon. As well as I Didn't See You There, which I executive produced, directed by Reed Davenport and produced by Keith Wilson. That's going to be a POV film and is releasing this weekend. And Art and Crimes by Krimes, which I directed and produced with Amanda Spain and Ben Murray. That's with MTV Docs, also releasing this week. And I also am a co-founder of Forward Doc, documentary filmmakers with disabilities, as a non-disabled active ally. So those are some of the ways that I'm kind of involved with impact, and I'm looking forward to being a filmmaker voice on the panel.
Thank you. And last but not least, Marianna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here. I'm Marianna Olinger. I'm a white-skinned Latina woman. I have shoulder-length brown curly hair and brown eyes. I'm wearing a dark gray button shirt, and I'm standing against a blurry background of my living room. And I'm talking from unceded Lenape Canarsie land, also known as Brooklyn, New York. I am originally from unceded Guarani land in the south of Brazil. And I'm a creator myself and an artist and an activist for human rights and social justice for approximately 20 years. I've acted in a number of campaigns, but normally from a nonprofit or government or social movement perspective. And I'm currently the impact campaigner for The Territory, which is a documentary co-produced with the Uruguay indigenous people from Rondônia in the southern Amazon in Brazil. So I hope to be able to, I'm learning a lot to learn from you, but also to be able to share a little bit of my experience, especially with The Territory.
All right, thank you, everyone. So I figured we could start with just some Impact 101 things for our members of our audience for whom Impact is new. I know I got into Impact because when I was working here, I had a lot of filmmakers who are saying as part of their fiscal sponsorship applications that they wanted their film to make an impact. And that was essentially the extent of their impact campaign. And I read the Impact Bible, which is the impact tool guide and Doc Society's impact tool guide and field kit. Did I say that correctly? Okay. Which is, I think, a must for anyone who's beginning to get an interest in impact. But Cecilia, can you just provide us like a difference, give us an idea what the difference between like impact and traditional distribution is? And then everyone else, like after she responds, you could probably like add to that because it's not such a straightforward answer. So
Sure, I can give a little bit of context on my background. So I actually didn't have a film background when I started working in this stuff, and I actually started working in nonprofits. That's sort of where I came from. And so filmmakers would come to me for research on their films so that they would have sort of a genuine and accurate reflection on their work, but also for what I didn't realize was impact. And so I guess the difference between that is just that impact work and the traditional distribution, impact work is more of what the film will do in the world, and traditional distribution is how people will see the film. So the idea is that the impact campaign is how the film sort of lives on, but does more of what you intend to do as far as like social change and good, and also to create critical conversations, the sparkle of that. So when I speak to my students about it, I think of impact as the more extrinsic vision of what the film can do and how it can create some sort of change.
Sam, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think that was a awesome description and great 101. I would just add to that in addition to, traditional distribution, an impact campaign is really the way to bridge your issue-based film or to the movement space, and for your film to be able to live within that space and work with movement leaders. So outside of people by chance seeing your film via Netflix or Hulu or YouTube, it's a chance to be really meaningful with the content you're creating and bring in the voices that you're featuring in a more meaningful way, and use film as a tool for building capacity, sparking action, and working together with people in the movement or involved in the issue that you've been covering.
So Andrew, in regards to impact, what do you see impact is, particularly in regards to something like moving beyond like raising awareness about an issue?
Yeah, we through the proposal process that we built at Perspective Fund, we really have a kind of expansive, self-defined view of what a filmmaker got into the project for. I think that's what we want to hear when we're asking about an impact vision. And to the point about how it might diverge from distribution and impact, like who are the audiences that you as the filmmaker might care about differently than a distributor will care about them? And what's that distinction? Like, why do you think the distributor in just the natural course of things might not really serve that audience that you're doing this, this years-long process that you're in? What's motivating you to do it? And what does success look like for you is really a more expansive definition of impact than those kind of tactical things that you might have to list in other funder applications in our previous one before we updated ours. So we're really trying to shift it to a little bit of self-assessment and letting a filmmaker tell us what impact is project specific.
Right. So Alysa, so since you are a filmmaker, would you like to just speak to some of the specificities of your current impact campaign with Art and Crimes?
Sure. Yeah,
I mean, we could get to the logistics of this later, but just to give people an idea of what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and Andrew said like the thing that is really meaningful to me at the end, and you're picking up on it too, which is project specific. And as a filmmaker who's done multiple campaigns and films, like I also was part of the Unrest impact campaign with another film that I produced with Lindsay Dryden and Trish Gillespie that directed by Jennifer Brea. And so each film does, when you're thinking of it, will have an impact in the world, probably some impact. And then you can also be conscious and specific in wanting to reach target audiences that may or may not be like natural core audiences for your film, and thinking about creative ways to do that. So I think of this of impact kind of at different stages in the process, and it's part of the creative process for me, and I think for many filmmakers, where we are thinking intentionally about how it's going to be seen. So like with Art and Crimes by Krimes, it's a film made with artists who are formerly incarcerated, and so we knew and identified that there were obviously that community is one of the communities that the film serves, but also more broadly the art world, and wanting to also reach small cities and rural communities, which are increasingly impacted by mass incarceration, but not necessarily served, and also where it's harder to sometimes get documentaries into, there aren't like as many art house theaters sometimes. So that's where we're working with that. And then that's with MTV Docs, and we're really working kind of creatively on an impact plan in tandem that is sort of separate, but working with distribution. And then Wildcat, where it's been a project that's with Amazon for, since post, they've been working with us on thinking about impact and audience and how we can, reach audiences around the issues in that film, like mental health and wellness, and veterans communities, because one of the protagonists of the film is a veteran. Excuse me. So, trying to find ways that you can, to the question of distribution versus impact, yes, they are distinct, but also practically speaking, I'm constantly thinking about how to, for each project, weave them together in ways where the team can be unified and everything can be, as much as possible, serving each other in terms of distribution and impact, and not working against it.
Thank you. And then Marianna, can you talk about your work with the territory and specifically with your work with the filmmakers? Like, how did you kind of drill down what you all wanted that impact campaign to be and what you wanted to focus on?
Thank you. So I think, first of all, it's important to see that in the specific case of the territory, the impact campaign was also thought of way before the film was finished, right? And including in the case of the territory, in the financing model of the film, one of the core film financiers agreed to re-grant any film profits into the impact campaign. So, and the film was acquired by a big distributor early on, and that meant that we started off with what we called the distributor acquired the film knowing that the film had an independent impact campaign that it was fully funded at that point. And that gave us, I think, a lot of opportunities to have those conversations very early on. So I think from one aspect, the filmmakers had been discussing with the community, which are also co-producers of the film. So we also have that other layer in which the participants are also co-producers and participated in the film in a number of different ways. So I think in our case, the impact is almost a continuation of a process that it started in the film very early on, discussing how this film was going to impact that community from the making of the film itself all the way into defining what we wanted from this impact campaign. So, and what I mean by that is that I don't think there's like a formula, but it's just we established a process in which we are in a continuous process of consultation and building with the community that is that co-produced and is also directly impacted by the issues in the film.
Thank you. And I always tell my students just kind of a short definition between the difference in impact and distribution. Distribution is trying to get your film out in front of as many eyes as possible, and impact, you're trying to be strategic about it for the purpose of some specific type of change. And what that change will be is what your impact campaign will focus on. So thank you, everybody. So just to kind of get into more little nitty gritties around what impact is. Could one of you speak to, or Sam, could you speak to like how long should an impact campaign be? And there's no right answer. So I'll start off with that.
Sure. And I think you just hit the nail on the head that there is no right answer. Okay. But it's something that at Exposure Labs, we've really been investigating. I think previously we experimented with our original feature productions, having an impact campaign that was 6 months, a year, and kind of a traditional components of each of those. So community management, et cetera. But I think there's a really interesting conversation happening in the field, and we're learning from experts and doing some internal learning ourselves that an impact campaign can actually be quite long-term. And when it's grounded in equity and values, and you're bringing in movement leaders or impact partners from the get-go, production through post-production to your impact campaign, in creating those trusted, deep relationships with people working on the ground in the issue space that you're covering, impact campaigns can actually have quite a long life. And if they do indeed build capacity or spark action or fulfill something that the movement needs, then it's quite sustainable to have your film have quite a long life in those spaces and continue to go on. But so you're right, it can span anything, but I think we're learning that if set up in that kind of relationship, it can go for quite a long time.
Absolutely. So you brought out an important topic around ethics and values. And when we met earlier this week, Alysa had some great, and actually Marianna as well, had some great comments about how you need to be pretty much in the same page, at least in the same book when it comes to your impact goals. So Alysa, could you speak to that, particularly in regards to, working closely with film protagonists or film participants?
Yeah, definitely. Also, I just want to say for the filmmakers in the room that, like, yes, your impact campaign can stretch a while. And if you're up for that, wonderful. Also, it doesn't have to. And as filmmakers, we're not always impact producers, and maybe we don't have the resources, and that's okay too. And sometimes campaigns can be and really effective as well. So it's not, yes, they can last. And I know you meant that too, Sam, but maybe it's worth for folks in the audience.
No, thank you.
Like, huh?
I said, thanks for bringing that. That's a good clarification.
Yeah, totally. Because I know myself, like as a filmmaker, I don't like, I'm not an organizer per se, and I don't consider myself an expert in that. And I want to sometimes be on to the next movie, but what can be nice is like setting it off well. And I think, Toni, you hit on it, where it's like, if you're grounded with and find those partners who the film can serve, what they're already doing, and working with the communities that you're involved with, I think it's much stronger. So like with Wildcat, we have, a grounded conservation organization that's at the heart of the story of the film. And so from those actual relationships that Samantha, who's our film participant, has on the ground in Peru, we're able, with her organization Hoja Nueva, we're able to tap into existing networks and have the film serve that. But also with a partnership like Amazon for distribution, we're able to reach communities that are far and wide, and funders for the work that's already being done to rescue animals and rewild them in the Amazon, and also to serve other organizations in that sphere. So I think working with your film participants is key. And then that's so different from like an Art and Crimes, what we're doing, which is around having an artist bureau of formerly incarcerated artists who are not in the film, and giving micro grants to those artists and having them do appearances regionally when the film screens. So it's not just the artists in the film always being showcased, but it's also other artists in sort of a broader network. And that's something that like could keep going if an organization that we're partnered with wants to continue that work, but it's not something that but it's also kind of a short-term discrete thing that we're doing. So yeah, but either way, it's like really grounding with what is the need in the communities, and having conversations. And for both films we did focus. I was thinking, there's a name for it. Sorry, like a brain trust.
Brain trust. Yeah. Brain trust. Yeah.
Brain trust sessions where you're gathering folks from the film, from the community, from the film side, and sometimes a distributor if they're involved, or funders of the campaign, and really thinking about what are the questions and needs, and moving from there forward.
Yeah, I would like to reiterate, brain trusts are really essential to this process, particularly if you're not in the organizing space. So essentially what a brain trust is you bring stakeholders in, usually anywhere, ideally like 7 to 10, to have a meeting to actually watch the film and discuss it, and discuss it from the perspective in regards to like how they can use the film to further their missions. And so many great things come out of Brain Trust. So you get a chance to learn in depth about specific organizations, their work they're doing, also any upcoming campaigns they may have that may actually be related to your film. So, I mean, I'd say a lot of impact producing is you're asking a lot of questions and you're doing a lot of listening and providing people what they want. So Marianna, could you speak to your work with Territory, but also because you work with the filmmaking co-op. So it would be great if you could like speak to that experience, versus like most of us who work directly with individual filmmakers.
So yeah, so I think the collaboration, the cooperation, the co-production in the Territory, as I said before, I think it was built, it permeated multiple aspects of the filmmaking. And before, from like the participants were involved in the narrative building, in shooting, in editing, they're credited. They took equal backend from the sales from the film. They shared copyright on the materials they shot. And all of those decisions were made with the community, right? It was not like, oh, the filmmakers did not arrive there and said, oh, this is how it's going to be, but it was like built with the community. So when they approached me, so we wanted to start to plan the impact campaign, we did a 2 months long consultation process with participants and existing partners from other like organizations, nonprofits that had collaborated with the Uruê Wawau and other participants before. I think it's really being an amazing learning process, and in the sense that there's no we understood, first of all, just going back a little bit, that there were some things that the community needed. In this particular case, it was rooted in like, how can this community continue telling their own narratives? How can we deal with narrative sovereignty and autonomy? And we understood it was very important that our impact campaign was rooted in that. And part of our work now is to we are actually working with the community to building on cultural and multimedia production center with them. So this is one of the ways in which we thought the community could, the impact campaign could impact the Territory as supporting that community into continuing telling their own narratives, right? So that's like part of what we decided to do and part of what we're working on. And another thing that we understood, and that has to do also with the timing of the campaign and the context for planning this campaign, is that we had a number of limitations in Brazil itself on how to get this film out during a year in which we have one of the most consequential elections campaign in the country. So how could we work with the film in that context, which is like a very, very polarized, and the film speaks to that context as well. So we needed to find ways in which to focus on different aspects of impact, like in different geographical spaces in different moments of the campaign. So we decided that the first year of the campaign, we would focus on a strategy that was from one side based on building that multimedia center in the Territory, but on the other hand, working with like, to a certain extent, piggybacking on the opportunities brought by our distributor and doing like a lot of political advocacy with that. But we're reserving a lot of like what we're calling impact distribution, targeting specific populations on the ground in Brazil for year 2 of the campaign, which is going to happen after the elections in Brazil are gone. So we can actually create space for generating like meaningful conversations that we think need to happen in that specific context.
All right, thank you.
Well,
Cecilia?
Sure, I just wanted to add that you hit it on the head with collaboration. Most of impact is actually based on the collaborations, and they tend to be the ones that drive the campaign. So to go back to the question of how long an impact campaign lasts, that actually can be dictated by the organizations that you do collaborate with, the activists that utilize the film in the space. So again, for example, a film that I worked on called Her Gunda. It's about 4 years since it premiered. And the film and the activists who were involved in the impact campaign, even from the Brain Trust, are still utilizing the film for their work. So it lives on that way. I think the collaboration is key. Involving the communities is really key as well. Like I would reference, there's an article by Sonia Childress, here driver, that just talks about the state of impact and the key to collaboration and involving communities. And I think that's something often to reference as well when we're thinking about working with the communities and the groups that we're working with in impact campaigns.
Thank you. Andrew, since you're the funder in the room, we've had I've seen a lot of questions come up in the chat about funding for impact campaigns. So I'm sure a lot of us have a lot to say about that on this panel, but I'll let you take it off since you're official. You give money.
What a setup for a question. So one thing I can say, the earliest stages of my time at Perspective Fund, I was kind of pleased to find out that we would have a lot of leeway offering production granting with an impact lens, right? So that we're not only making campaign funds available for projects that have already made it through the increasingly commercial and centralized production financing process, that, you know, some grants are available, some investment is available, the market has a big influence, and if you make it, you can have an impact campaign. Here's a grant. You know, we are engaging way earlier in the process and able to support projects in production using a similar set of criteria, honestly, to those that you would apply if you were assessing the beginnings of a campaign. Again, that centrality of like, how much are you aware of the concentric circles of impact that you will have between the people that you're filming with, the organizers and activists working on an issue where your film is going to just land in their world. So if you know how that's going to go really early on, I think that's really important. And then, you know, further and further out in this concentric circle kind of model, all the way to, I know we talked about support for the people in the film, like actual grants that we can make available. We've started a research process, at least, about how to do this well to support film participants. So it's not really like the filmmaker has to decide within the limited pool of a production financing plan or a impact financing plan how to actually make things available to the people you've been filming with. It's a separate conversation that we can have once we've taken care of all that stuff with our grantees.
Thank you. Yes, was that Marianna?
I was just gonna say that's awesome because
Alysa, okay.
The people who are in the films do so much labor and service in making appearances, talking about the film, doing that work of impact. And we often do budget it into an impact plan, but to have that specifically and thoughtfully addressed by funders, I think will be hugely impactful to the field. And I think the field is another place where we can have impact, right? Like we can have impact around accessibility, for example, with our documentaries. You know, are we making our films accessible to people with disabilities? Are we bringing documentaries into new spaces? And how are we doing that? And who's doing that labor is worth thinking about, because I think those changes can change, then it's like you're changing your film, you're doing something for your film and your story, but it's also this much bigger, I like that image of the concentric circles, like it can happen within the issue and the movement in terms of the plot of what your film is about, but also in terms of just like the film world and how we're changing the way we think about documentaries and how they operate and who they're for.
Right.
Who they're for and who they're by as well.
Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, the hiring practice can be a site of impact too, right? For a film and who's making it and who's being funded, for sure.
Yeah, so one of the initiatives I'm doing impact for is called a document called The Power of Personal Documentary Stories. And it's a study created by Jennifer Crystal Chen and Shavana Chevanis as part of Represent Media. And it's what we're trying to do is raise awareness about the struggles that BIPOCs have and getting support and funding for their personal stories. So I'm doing an impact for that document, and hopefully it will make some changes in the field, as you say, Alysa. Let's talk about, because a lot of people do have questions about the money, but which I want to talk more about that, but I also want to talk about kind of go back to some of the basics in regards to like, how do you define who your targets are for impact, like essentially finding your audience. And I like, Andrew, what you said about the concentric circles, because when I teach the class on impact reducing, I talk about finding like your circles of audiences. So it's like their primary audience, and then there's like secondary and tertiary, and then there are like other ones as well. But it's essentially looking at who you want to like see the film. And for example, I'll give an example of the Through the Night. I did some impact producing for that film when I was working with Looky Pictures. And Through the Night is Lloyd Limba's film about the 24-hour daycare in New Rochelle, New York. So the primary audience for that she wanted to focus on were people who were like the folks in the film. So either daycare workers, specifically 24-hour daycare workers, which is a lot. I didn't even know it was a thing because I don't have kids, but it is a thing. And then also unions, because the Nunu and Patrick, who are in the film, were part of a daycare union. And then the parents who use this daycare center. So those are the primary audiences. And then your secondary audiences were, and then also primary Black and brown women, because that's who's primarily featured in the film. Secondary audiences were like other parents, policymakers, legislature, members of legislature, that type of thing. So really kind of focusing on who that specific audience is can really help you kind of narrow down like what your impact focus will be. You're about to talk, Cecilia. No, you're just drinking water. Okay, not to put you on the spot. But yes, go ahead, Sam.
I was just going to second what you said. I think that sometimes there's a fear of getting too specific, especially with impact producing. And I mean, in the age of COVID, this phrase isn't as relevant, but at one point, I think there is a desire to get as many butts and seats in the theater, and also to kind of cast your net wide and hope to make a difference. But I think by getting specific and bringing in those movement leaders or impact partners from the get-go, you can really hone in on who the film is for and who is being involved in the filmmaking process, that then can define who your impact campaign is for. So it is really a tool that can be used in that way. But I think yeah, it's a learning that we've been going through. And I really love that image of the concentric circle as well.
The circles of audiences. I'm trying to make that a thing.
I think if you going back to the document, I guess the Bible of impact.
Yeah.
They talk about the 4 impact dynamics, which is changing minds, changing behaviors, building structures, and building communities. And so if you think about it, when I talk to my students, you think about it within those goals, the audience actually changes. So if your goal is to change from sort of a mindset, you might be targeting a specific group. If your goal is to change a structure, you might be targeting some sort of political body or something like that. So it depends on really your goals. I think that defines who your audience is in most ways, I think.
So Marianna and Alysa, could you all get back to kind of the money piece? Could you all speak about your experiences trying to raise money for your various impact campaigns? Alysa, would you like to go first?
Sure. So is that okay,
Okay.
Marianna?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
So, well, it's always a thing, right? To raise funds for our work. It's often not easy. And I think one thing I do when I'm thinking about any project I'm doing is I try to conceive of it at different scales. I think it's actually a really good creative exercise when you're designing something. And maybe this comes from me being an architect before a filmmaker, but like, I think about like the relationship of the detail to the whole thing. And so you're able then to implement at whatever scale you can raise the resources for, and your design is there and it's all speaking to each other, so that if you are thinking that you're doing something at this scale and all of a sudden the resources appear to scale up, you kind of know what that might look like. So I'll just say that as far as like the creative side of it. And then, you know, for fundraising, I've had success. I've had more success, frankly, with like individuals who care about an issue or who are executive producers on a project than I have. I'm just speaking my own experience. I don't know if this is generalizable than with, you know, foundation funds, open call type of stuff. Although there are, you know, some out there like Perspective who are actively funding in the space. There used to be, oh God, called, started with an F. Do you know what I'm talking about, Andrew? Diana Barrett's thing.
The Fledgling Fund.
The Fledgling Fund, yeah. They were sort of really early in that space of like identifying that's where they wanted to fund. So I've had sort of more success with like people who are inherently investing in that issue or in about me and my work as an artist or the director, if I'm not directing, or the people in the film. So I think thinking about that as you're fundraising for production and those relationships and which ones can be carried through to impact is really important and beneficial. And then also, you know, applying for the grants. And then, you know, also like on a film like Wildcat, where we're with a distributor early, we're not separately, as far as I know, raising for an impact campaign as such, but the organizations that are related are probably going to benefit from the partnerships and be supported. And the distributor is also investing in some beneficial impact activities, right, related to the film. But that's not a film where like we as filmmakers are doing a separate impact campaign because of the nature of how our relationship is and also what our aims are. So I think it's also, you can find partners who are willing to do that. Sorry, but I couldn't tell if you were raising your hand, Toni, because it's like choppy.
Oh, no.
Oh,
sorry.
Okay.
I was waving to somebody. Sorry.
Okay, good. But anyway, that's like a long and short of it. But I think getting your budget scalable so that you can raise and implement, even if you do, okay, if I only raise X $1,000 and kind of figuring out what your baseline is, and then being able to build on that. Because often once an impact campaign has momentum, it's also easier to your chips, and it can be easy to fundraise.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I
And
think,
Marianna?
yeah, I think Alysa covered like much of like the experience of the territory specifically, but I think one thing that is important to raise is that Doc Society, again, was like an early supporter of the film. The territory, I mean, for folks who are not familiar, the territory is related to climate issues in the environment, and the territory was an early participant of one of the Doc Society's climate story labs. And I think like those early supports from people in the field, in the impact field, like Doc Society or Luminate, which came to be one of our financiers later on, it was very important to get the impact campaign as it exists right now. But now we're also in a moment in which we're out there, the impact campaign exists. We are with a big distributor, and we are moving to approach other funders, which are not necessarily like industry funders, but are issue-based funders. So our funders who are funding like climate issues or indigenous issues, and they are interested in filming films or, you know, narrative pieces that are going to have a direct impact in that specific field. So I think there is, in the case of the territory, we have those two like different approaches. One like working specifically through like industry, the film industry and impact existing funders, but also moving to exploring spaces for funders that are funding the issue itself and not necessarily our industry funders.
Exactly, because there definitely is more money in documentary for impact, but it's still not as much as compared to like the other stages of the production process. Thank you. So I wanted to, before we go to some questions, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the materials that are part of Impact. So Cecilia, you mentioned you write educational guides. So could you speak to like what that process is? And then I know all of us who have worked on various impact campaigns have worked on various types of documents, so we can talk about that as well.
Sure. So that process is it's a little tedious because you have to watch the film over and over and over again, but you also have to start thinking it from a lens of who the film is going to be brought to and the discussion guide will take place with. So in my case, of just thinking about recently with Delicado, I was thinking about high schoolers, which, I might not look at, but it's been a while since I've been in high school. So not really thinking about how they're absorbing information is really important, how they look at media. So looking at how they think about data. And then also, so now you're thinking like, they might be able to take the film in doses. That probably makes more sense. So like just kind of thinking about that process can be really tedious, but it's also really rewarding in a way that you're breaking down parts of the film and thinking about what was the intention of this part? Why did they keep this? And also giving voice to the character, a little bit more of a voice to the character, to the subjects that and looking further into their story. So that process is quite tedious but rewarding, and also working with the filmmakers as well. And also a lot of that, I take a lot of notes during the brain trust part of it, because that's when you get a lot of the like knowledge around the lesson plans. But yeah, it's a fun process. But also sort of like, then you get to the part where like, oh no, the whole film should be like a whole thing. So that's when you start to think about like the discussion guide, thinking about the overall issues, and then also the grid part is like leading them into spaces where they can discuss it a little bit more, taking a look at what this organization is doing as far as their work is concerned. So amplifying the work of others is also part of the process as well.
Oh, so should we keep going?
You can keep going. It's just going to go black on. The
Oh,
screen
okay.
for me.
Thank you. Thank you.
I can add a few
okay.
things with materials if that's helpful.
Yes, go ahead, Alysa.
Okay, so educational materials. Another thing that's I think important to think about if your film is going to be with a distributor is, they're going to speak the language of marketing and promotion. And so how do you kind of translate that in and find overlap? So, your trailer can be something that's used for impact, to try to get the film out there, your social media assets, your website, your as like the territory has this awesome website, for its impact campaign, or your poster, your press is a really important site or material. It's kind of a way of thinking about materials. So there's all these assets. Sometimes people do modules, like educational modules of the film, or shortened excerpts of a film for various contexts, because oftentimes when you want to have a longer conversation about a film, it's tough to ask people to sit down and watch 90 minutes and then talk for another 90 minutes. So thinking about that is really important materials wise. We did that with Unrest and it was successful. I've done that with other films too. So I think, and those are some things that can double, like they can do work in distribution and they can do work in impact, and they bring these things together. And so I think as a producer or director, if you want to be able to work in both of those worlds, being able to kind of learn the language of both of them and call maybe the same, it's like a little bit of double speak, but you're like calling the same thing a different thing, in order to be able to, because you're like laser focused on the thing you want to change in the world and the story and its importance and the who and who you care about, your team, the people who are in the film and the people you want to reach. So I think that you can use assets that are part of distribution for impact, and that's a value.
You can also create assets too. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
for an impact campaign I just finished called Sisters on Track, which is on Netflix. That was quite interesting because we were well funded by Colgate-Palmolive. Instead of doing a marketing campaign. They decided to do an impact campaign, which was like the first time they ever decided to do that.
Okay, wait,
Yeah.
so talk about how y'all connected with Colgate.
They're in the film.
Okay, they're in the film, okay.
They're in the film, so that's another way, I guess, to get funded. But they so not many people know about this, but they run the longest running women's track event for young girls, I guess, in the country. It's like 35 years and change. So they're part of the film. And so they're heavily featured, and they sort of the filmmakers approach them, to their credit, to be like, can you run an impact campaign with our film? It's going to be on Netflix. So that was in itself was a fun thing to do, to work between Netflix and a big corporation. But because of that, we were able to create ancillary content, which actually, if you go into the website, you'll see like there's like, it's about track. So young girls who run track. So you'll see like how to run track, like all of these like mental health guides, these different things. So creating the ancillary content was actually a lot of fun. Also, because it was during COVID, a lot of our stuff was like virtual panels.
I'm sorry, y'all.
No problem. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I'm the
you're
one
fine.
today.
I was going to say too, thinking about educational materials and creating additional toolkits and things that can kind of help your impact campaign along. When we were seeking distribution in the past, we had negotiated the right to create content for educational, so like shorter cuts, as you were saying, a common core curriculum with Chasing Coral, and in the past it's kind of been this open door to then create be able to have accessibility for an impact campaign. So with most schools, you can't really access like a Netflix over the server. So it means putting shorter content or the film on YouTube, which can then be translated and helpful for organizations that you're working for. Wanted to also say with materials, thinking about like discussion guides and toolkits, bringing in those impact partners early and hearing from them and being able to adapt really quickly. I think, at one point we were sending discussion guides and toolkits off to a designer, and they were gorgeous and really like detailed. But when we, especially our work in the US South, working with movement leaders there, they know what they're doing, and having a Google Doc that is still very beautiful and has information and is guiding and helps support using film as a capacity building tool, but allowing them to make the changes or working with them to make sure it fits into their work has been really, really useful. And we find that our materials use a lot more than sometimes these big, beautiful documents that we used to make.
Yeah, I'm with Odyssey Impact. We were taking on a new film, and we recently had a brain trust, and now we're doing follow-up calls with the people who attended. And one of the things that we're asking is like, what resources are already out there that we can just point people to, but also we're asking what needs to be created as well. So that's important. All right. So any other comments about materials? Alysa or Marianna, or
like as you're making them, again, just this idea that you're working with the people who are directly impacted, who are involved with the story, who are involved with the movement. And I love what you said, Toni, about pointing to existing resources, because I'm, the idea that you're just like repurposing all this other stuff that's out there, sometimes that's useful, but it also can just be unnecessary.
Well, we wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. So I'm just going to go through in the chat. Alysa, someone asked, will Netflix help fund your, sorry, I should be talking to Mike. Alysa, somebody asked, will Netflix help you fund your impact campaign?
I mean, I would sure ask them if I had them on the phone. I don't know. I actually haven't worked with Netflix on, maybe Sam, you can speak to that from Exposure Labs, having had some Netflix projects.
Yeah.
The Social Dilemma, right?
Social Dilemma and Chasing Coral were both on Netflix. And they have been very open to running an impact campaign, and we're the distributor that was able to, help us make it accessible for schools and organizers. I don't think I can speak to the exact dollar amount, but can look back and get back and share if we were funded. But I also know that Netflix is also investing in kind of an internal impact team as well. So,
Oh, they are.
Again,
Okay. I didn't know
a
that.
lot of the-
All right. That's great.
I don't know Netflix specifically, but a lot of the bigger distributors like that, they may not be like, I'm going to invest in your impact campaign, filmmaker. But again, it's this kind of strategic dance where you're like, okay, here's what we think is going to be useful for you. We know, distributor, what you're thinking about, right? We know what you're motivated by in most cases, money, eyeballs, whatever, and awards. So how can what we want to do be fit within that so that you will see it as beneficial to you? Because that is the only way that I've had success with distributors investing in that. And you're not deceptive. You're thinking creatively about how it actually can serve that. It can serve both. So, but it's not like you're going to them like, hey, will you fund this impact campaign I want to do that's separate from, what you're doing.
And I'll just
I
clarify,
think,
I don't know if they're, I don't know if Netflix is creating a direct impact team, but they value it, and
Okay.
we can.
Marianna, I saw you nodding your head vigorously.
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that I think so when our film got a big distributor, one of our concerns is like, will this distributor allow us to show the film when we want, in the way we want? And one of the things that happened with our particular experience with the territory, we were able to negotiate contractually. And another shout out to Doc Society, who was really helpful. Folks were really helpful in that. And we were able to negotiate that our independent impact campaign was formally acknowledged in the contract. And we, under a figure of that, we both would, both the distributor and us would have our impact work, and under this figure of mutual consultation rights. And basically what happens is that we basically have to negotiate everything with them, but that also created a lot of opportunities. So things that, for example, initially our distributor was not going to make or invest money in a discussion guide. And we said, for our particular film, we think is like, we really need to have a discussion guide. We're going to do it from our impact budget if like need be. And we were preparing to do that. And eventually the distributor came and said, no, we're actually doing it. And we're going to do it in collaboration with you. So they ended up actually like supporting the making of the discussion guide, but with us consulting with us basically all along the way. So I think a number of opportunities for collaboration on the impact side emerged during our the making of this campaign in collaboration with this distributor. And another thing that for me was surprising, it was that specifically for theatrical distribution, and that was in our case was different between different distributors because we're working, we had theatrical in different parts of the world. But I saw and I felt that a number of the theatrical distributors were genuinely interested in partnering with Impact to bring people to the theaters, for instance, right? And I think we were able to establish some successful partnerships just in building together. There was a space for that in our particular case.
Thank you. Andrew?
I want to say just one other thing, because you brought
sorry.
up kind of contractual stuff too. And it's like, sometimes you're going to have that leverage. A distributor really wants your movie and you're like, all right, here's the deal. We're going to do this for Impact also. And sometimes you don't, and it's a leap of faith. And I would say when it is, if Impact is important to you, talk to other filmmakers who've worked with that distributor. And I say this about anything contractually, actually, talk with other people who've worked with those people in the past. It's not like you should just take their word verbatim, and you should always get multiple, I think, points of information if you can, but it's hard because a lot of times it is a leap of faith. On paper, you're not going to get permission, but sometimes that is in practice very feasible. even though on paper, because some big corporation's not going to sign away any control.
Yeah, Knock Down the House was the first Netflix acquisition that actually they requested, demanded like an impact campaign as part of the negotiations.
Yeah, and they had
because of
tremendous
the nature of that
leverage.
film.
Because
Exactly.
that was a bidding war type of situation, you know?
Mhm.
Andrew, were you gonna say-
Andrew,
Yeah, I was going to talk about all the other scenarios where there is almost no leverage and the distributors have all the cards, like, this average situation. But, it can be pretty bleak to think of this ahead of you that you have to tackle individually on your project, and how badly, you want that distribution. But I'll just flag, I guess, to try to reframe that a little bit, perspective, in addition to doing our individual project granting, we make as much support available to organizations who are working on some of these problems represented on this panel. People have mentioned others like Doc Society. I don't think anyone mentioned distribution advocates, but I definitely want to flag some of the work they've begun to do. So it's still bleak. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that, but any organizations that you can find to help you think through this, or fellow filmmakers, I think is organizing work that we're equally interested in, that perspective. So,
all right, we have a question in person. Yes, so please ask your question, sir.
I'll ask my question in person. Can you all hear? Okay.
Yes, we can
Okay,
hear.
great. Yeah, thanks to all the panelists for everything you all have been sharing. I guess my question is, like, since the kind of quote unquote traditional distribution has just been changing so much, maybe to put it lightly, and then I think a lot of independent filmmakers in particular are finding themselves in situations either by choice or by default, basically doing some form of self-distribution. I'm just wondering if you all are seeing kind of, you were talking about impact versus distribution as in like a one or the other, or the relationship between the two, but are you seeing in scenarios where someone's self-distributing that they are really becoming one and the same, by choice or default? And if so, do you have any examples of successful campaigns that, any of you have worked on where they haven't been working with a, so to speak, traditional or third-party distributor and have been able to both get the film out there and, run an impact campaign without having that, one or more distribution partners?
Yeah, I'm from my experience, most people have been really running their impact campaigns independently. They may have a distributor, like a PBS or something like that, who does some work in regards to like PBS in-house. They have somebody who writes educational guides, which could be lead to discussion guide. Yeah, I don't really have any experience working with films that have larger distributors.
Maybe just to clarify, like where there's, where the impact campaign is the only way that people could see the film.
Oh, the only way.
Like what I'm saying is, like, if there's not, a distributor that the filmmaker is able to work with, like, have you seen situations where the impact campaign is the distribution, and has that been, if you've seen that, has that been successful?
I really haven't, but I think a lot of people who want to show their film in the impact space are really they have a purpose behind it, and they really want to drive it toward a specific audience. So they are doing a lot of the work that they're on. I'll let somebody else speak to this question.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Sam.
Oh, I was just going to say, I can't necessarily speak to the filmmakers that I've encountered that's the only way they're distributing their film, but we have in some of our impact work with filmmakers who are self-distributing. And I think that they do still have a very successful impact campaign by working like in coalition with other independent filmmakers and then building relationships with organizations. And I find that they often do have really strong relationships with the subjects of their film and the movements they're in. But I have seen the power of their impact campaign and in getting it out there, but I don't know if I can necessarily say that's the only way they're distributing their film.
Anybody else like to speak to that question?
I mean, I've seen it I can't think of specific films, but I've seen it more with short films where they've done self-distribution, and that be the only way. And then at some point, actually, because of the impact campaign and the strength of the impact campaign, it would lead to something like educational distribution. So I've seen that happen.
All right, we'll go to our next question from Andre Perez. How do we get resources to pay an impact producer? Are there good sample budgets that will help us know what's standard? At what point in the production process should we be applying for impact grants? So lots of questions in that one. Who wants to take it? I have responses, but I've been talking a lot, so.
How do you get, I mean, I think we kind of answered something about fundraising,
Mhm.
but I do think being able to include it, like get a bid from an impact producer, talk to someone so that you're budgeting and raising funds according to the person you actually want to work with and what it will cost to work with them. And I've seen some kind of lots of variation in what people charge. I mean, that's true throughout the independent film world, but also with impact producing. So I think, yeah, find your people that you maybe want to work with, and then fundraise. Also, that's I've found to be a more powerful pitch. Hey, I want to work with Toni as my impact producer. This is how much it's going to cost. We've already talked about it. Now, can you fund this? This is a thing. She wants to work with me. I want to work with her. So that can be a stronger pitch too. And Andrew's nodding. So that's good because he sees these things all the time. The like vague, I will hire an impact producer with some number is probably gives them less confidence as funders. And then what was how soon would you start fundraising for impact?
For impact, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I would say as soon as you identify someone who could support it, and you have an idea for what you want to have supported, but everyone else thinks.
I would say sooner. I would say as far as fundraising, perhaps when you're about to start the post process, because it takes a long time. Your grant cycles are pretty long. But I would start then as well. And also like at the time when you're at the time where you're going to have like a rough cut or a fine cut, that's at the time when you want to start thinking about doing brain trusts as well, to kind of get down to the specifics of what your impact campaign will be. And I also want to do a shout out to IDA has this grants database on their website, which is searchable. It's done in Airtable. It's amazing, and you can search for funding based on the stage of production that you're in. So go there to look for impact funding as well. And then Andrew also asked about budgets. Where do people find budgets on for impact producing?
I'll do from the filmmaker side because we do often do the budgets.
Yes.
With impact budgets, I tend to just build them from scratch. Again, coming from this idea that like, it's so specific to each film and each campaign. It's like, it doesn't even have all the standard things that, that sort of most productions have where, so I just sort of say, okay, what are the things that I need money for? And I make my list and figure it out. And they're usually not super extensive. The ones that I've done, like once you get granular maybe, and you're like, okay, how much does this event cost? What's the catering, blah, blah, blah. But like, are there, so I don't know of any that exist as templates. You could probably ask other producers, or if you're working with an experienced impact producer, they may have on file several budgets that they've worked on and that they'll draw on if they're helping you create the rest of your budget. But I tend to just build it. Yeah.
Cecilia?
Yeah, there are templates. One template I use is on the Doc Society's website, actually. So they have a template that you can use, and there's a lot of stuff that's included that if you want to take a look at it, you can be like, I don't need this kind of stuff. Like, for example, during COVID, you didn't need traveling expenses. So like that kind of stuff, you can really kind of take a look, but they have a really extensive breakdown of a budget.
Yeah, big shout out to Doc Society. I know we have hopefully a global audience here, but Doc Society, the Impactful Guide and Toolkit is a must, but also Doc Society runs Good Pitch National, which happens in a lot of different countries. And they also have Good Pitch Local. And what those initiatives are about are essentially training filmmakers on how to pitch to an audience that of potential stakeholders or organizations that may help them with the film. So it's like producing for impact. Pitching for impact. So I would say sign up for Doc Society's mailing list. If you are brand new to impact, sign up for Good Pitch Local events. They are everywhere. Like I've met folks who are part of Good Pitch Local, like in India, and Mustafa participated. His an audience is from Egypt, and he participated in Good Pitch in Egypt. So that's a great organization to really get some like one-on-one assistance with. And I've actually facilitated for them too. They really walk filmmakers like from the beginning to the process of like what impact is. So let's go to some other questions. Okay, I'm just scrolling through. Oh, we have more in the room. Okay, I'm looking at the chat and there's some people here in the room and I forget about y'all. Sorry, I've been zooming too long as we all have. So
thank you. I'm just curious to know how do you say, as an impact producer, how do you set plan for films produced in international co-productions, because there are some language barrier, cultural barrier. So again, do you need another regional impact producer for a certain film?
yeah, so I mean, there are impact producers who specialize in like different areas, but also, you know, obviously speak different languages. And particularly when you are going into communities, it's really important to have someone who speaks the language. So for example, I worked briefly on the impact campaign for Fruits of Labor. It's Emily Cohen-Ibanez's film. And there are two portions of the impact campaign, but there was one portion that's going to be set in Mexico that is going to be doing outreach to communities there. And I do not speak the Spanish. So like I was not, you know, we talked about it and I didn't feel comfortable like taking on that role because like I don't speak Spanish and people were going to be going deep into these communities. And it's really important to have that that ability to communicate. So those are things you have to think about when you're bringing on a impact producer.
I've also heard of when impact campaigns kind of, or if the subject is global, like you said, Toni, there being kind of like a main impact producer and then regional impact producers, because it's just hard to know what the movement looks like on the ground if you're not from that community.
Exactly. Anybody on the screen would like to speak to that, particularly Marianna, since you got the international experience up there?
Yeah, I think in our case, I mean, I'm Brazilian. I had previous knowledge of the issue approached in the film. I had previous knowledge of the movement, but I'm based in the US. And I think that was probably like one of the things the filmmakers were looking for when they found me, someone who were able to, like, you know, be in different spaces at the same time and speaking both languages. And when I talk about language, not only like actual language, but, you know, film language and movement language, community work language. But we have involved other producers, local producers as well. And in the case of our campaign, we do have a global component and we do have a very local component. And it would be impossible to do the local component without like local partners and local producers in the film, in the team.
All right, well, that is all the time we have. I want to thank our audience here in person, as well as our vast audience out there in the zooming around. I know you had a lot of questions, so I'm going to get with our fellow panelists and see if we can like save this chat so we could possibly like address some of these questions later, like in a document or something. We'll figure it out. But thank you. Sign up for that mailing list for Doc Society. Check out Wildcats and Territory and Art of Crimes by Krimes and American Dream and Other Fairy Tales, which is going to be in LA next week, y'all. So in Lamley Theaters. So I'll be there. And what other films we got going on here?
There's Delicado and POV. Just came out
All
Monday.
right, Delicado.
And I just say, check with Exposure Lab's website. We have some short form content coming out that we're really excited about.
All right. Anything you want to plug, Andrew, besides people sending applications for money?
Perspectivefund.org. It's all available there.
All right. Thank you all for being here, and on to the next session. Woohoo! Real
Thank
2022.
you all.